I'd like to welcome Ganesh Iyer, who is the CEO of Mphasis, which is an IT services company, and also Mike Useem, who's a Wharton management professor, and he's also the director of Wharton Center for Leadership and Change Management. Thanks, both of you, for coming in today to talk about the personal transformation that has to take place for business leaders, especially CEOs, the top leaders, the top team, when their company's trying to undergo company-wide digital transformation. So we hear a lot about the need for companies to transform themselves digitally because they're not going to stay competitive if they don't do that. What we don't hear very much about is this idea that before a company can change, that the leader has to have a personal transformation to understand what digital means to the world and to his company in particular. And I think what's interesting about that is, why is that transformation often difficult for the CEO? And some of the things that come up are things like ego, reluctant to look foolish in front of subordinates. These are things behind the scenes that we don't often hear about. There's denial, there's fear of failure. All of these things can hamper CEOs' performance when it comes to digital transformation. So I'd like to hear your views about those challenges and how the CEO and other top leaders can work to overcome them. Ganesh, let's start with you.
So probably I'll give you my own personal journey. And I wanted to get onto the Facebook. And I approached my teenage daughter. And she said, I'll help you to set up the account. And then I asked her a question what's the difference between email and Facebook? So at that stage, I realized how ignorant I was. And then suddenly in the last 2-3 years, the buzzword is digital. You're seeing 3D printing. You're seeing robotics, artificial intelligence. Now people are talking about driverless cars, tools and automation, affecting every industry and sphere of work. So I actually did an introspection and said, am I the right person to lead this great company called Mphasis to its success in the new digital world? Because I had to be authentic and honest if I'm not the right person to allow somebody else to lead the company rather than pretending I'm the right person. 30 years of working in the industry was a baggage because you build your muscle memory. So I would say the first thing is realization whether you need to change is the first point that I had to confront. And once I came to that realization, then I put up a mind map to figure out what would prevent me from learning. I'll come to that later, but I would say the starting point for the CEO is recognition that they have to change. It requires fundamentally change in their learning, new skills to be acquired. And after that, the journey begins. There are lots of hurdles in that journey, but I'll let you get to Mike rather than going on forever on this question.
So this is a personal transformation.
Yeah, well, to pick up on what Ganesh has said, I think the underlying challenge that everybody, including Ganesh, faces is that the pace of change is, simply put, accelerated. So the technologies out there, what customers want, more rapidly turning over or changing now than, say, 15 or 20 years ago. Historically, thus, companies did have the privilege, if you take the clock back 10 or 15 years, of changing CEOs as the market changed, and at least in the U.S., to some degree in India as well. Chief executives historically have usually served somewhere between 5 and 10 years, and that was sort of the pace of change. So new era, new CEO is replacing the old one. You've got a different kind of person now in that new era. The problem now, though, is that the pace of change is not, let's say, 5 or 10 years. The waves are not that long. They're more like 18 months. And thus, Ganesh and people with comparable positions are really having to reinvent themselves. Otherwise, they're going to get reinvented by the market they're facing. And the digital transformation that we're thinking about, we all know about, if anything, has an even shorter time cycle than just about anything else that we know out there. Thus, back to Ganesh's reference to Facebook and acquiring what you need to know to navigate that, I think it's incumbent on all of us, top executives and frontline managers, to get up to speed on the digital transformation that is literally turning a 5 or 10 year cycle in the way markets work into a 5 or 10 month cycle these days.
You made reference, Ganesh, to mind mapping, or sort of a shift in thinking when it comes to this. So what did you mean by that, and how did you accomplish that for yourself?
So, I started identifying what are the inhibitors for me to change. And I identified ego, ignorance, fear of failure. These are the three factors which I felt would prevent me from changing. Because for me to go and admit that I don't know, please teach me, and going to a teenager or to a fresher within the company, sitting next to him or her, saying, please take me through, what are you doing for the customer? What are the demands of the customer? I had to shed those elements first. Give up my ego and reach deep down within the organization. Basically, let learning and innovation come from all across the organization. That was the starting point in my mind map, which led me to various activities that I undertook over the last 18 months. To say that I have become a digital expert is definitely not true. But in the last 18 months, I have fully realized the power that digital wields, the opportunity it offers to a company like Mphasis, and it is an opportunity for us to surge ahead. And I need to take the ownership of transformation of this company. And that journey started 18 months ago, as I mentioned.
And, picking up on that, I like the underlying notion that this is something you just have to do. Getting it done is something else, but without that commitment to master this new digital terrain, none of us are going anywhere. With that commitment, though, turning to your children, or, for example, and my guess is Ganesh has this in his own company, GE has long had a practice of what they call reverse mentoring. Normally we think of mentoring of somebody 15, 20 years ahead of us, kind of sharing their wisdom and helping us as the new generation learn what they've already long known. Reverse mentoring means nothing more than taking people who are 20 years younger, who have been raised on the digital platform, and being willing, without the ego getting in the way, to listen. You have to be willing to listen and learn from people who are much younger, in much lower positions of authority, because they are just a great source of thinking about what the company needs, what you can learn. And to be able to work with reverse mentoring, I think, is maybe one of the most fruitful directions to go. I'll just add, though, from a lot of research that's out there on digital transformation and how we need to navigate our way through it, we have to become, I think, an extremely good listener. Again, we know a lot if we're in a position of great authority, but the world is changing so fast that if we're not actively listening through social media, if we're not digesting, if we're not analyzing what's out there, we're going to be at a disadvantage as well. So to get back to the main point, taking charge of your own transformation is the first step. And then the second step with that as a commitment is turning to your children, to reverse mentors, and just getting your antenna out there to hear what's going on.
Mike, you wrote a seminal book, which was on leadership, called The Leader's Checklist, and it put forth 15 mission-critical principles for managing a company. Is there a digital checklist for leaders that you could draw on through your book that would help CEOs and let's say the top team to think about this whole idea of transformation?
Yes, and let me briefly reference the idea of a checklist, and then we'll get into the substance. The idea of a checklist is you've got a list of mission-critical steps you just have to be savvy about, you have to take. And the traditional leader's checklist would include, just to pick out 3 items to illustrate the point, the ability to think strategically, to communicate persuasively, and to decide decisively. If you haven't got all 3 of those, you're probably not going to lead very well. And there are probably another dozen I would add on to that. Having said that, again, when it comes to the digital terrain that we all are on, it's treacherous. I'm going to briefly reference 2 such lists that are out there, and I'd love to hear Ganesh pick up on this and maybe add to what I'm about to very briefly summarize. Our school published a book this year. It's got a great subtitle. The main title, The Engaged Leader, subtitle, A Strategy for Your Digital Transformation. And Charlene Lee, the author there, really has 3 checklist items. Here they are. Number 1, you have to become an extremely adept listener through all the traditional means and now through digital media as well. Number 2, you have to become extremely good at using those sources of information coming in to get information out. So listening in and then sharing out. And then number 3, and this really is something that I would not have anticipated 5 or 10 years ago, there is so much competition for attention that you also have to become extremely good at engaging those that are hearing where you want to take the company. So in 5 or 10 years back, maybe 20 years back, a memo comes out from the corner office, everybody reads that, and they kind of got their marching orders. Doesn't work that way anymore, to say the obvious. So listening, communicating out, and then especially on that latter point, number 3, learning how to engage people in ways that are much more challenging now. A second checklist, this comes from a nano tool. We do nano tools here, and a couple people have put together a nano tool on this very topic. And I'm going to pick out 3 items that they offer, a checklist for a top executive or anybody really in management to be concerned with. Number 1, you have to have compelling content, again, because the information world is so cluttered with competing messages. Number 2, you have to find ways of what the authors of the nano tool refer to as distributional leverage. So how do you actually get the information out to all 15,000 people who are working for you? Number 3, you have to become very good at filtering and analyzing data coming in. Again, so much megabytes of data coming hourly into our office. We need to master the art of digital filtering and analyzing. And I think number 4, this is pretty much a summary for why we're even talking about this topic. Without quite realizing how the advent of digital technology and information has affected the world, it has become a genuinely disruptive force, in the best sense of disruptive innovations, for every market. And so the 4th digital leaders checklist here is, even if you are secure, let's say, in the halls, the groves of academia here, it's coming here, it's come to the New York Times, it's coming to GE, it's coming everywhere. I'll stop on that. Ganesh, you probably have an item or 2 to add to a leader's checklist on digital everything.
So, promoting a culture of experimentation, because compressed cycle, innovation, newer ways of doing things. So promoting a culture of experimentation. Second thing is the guts to cannibalize your own business.
Totally.
And the last one, which I heard from other people and which was very well articulated, world of co-opting or co-creating. So you can do a lot more by co-opting other players to join hands with you so that you can succeed together. It could be your customer, it could be your partner. So these are the 3 attributes which probably in the analog world we didn't need to confront or inject as much. But I certainly hope that every employee within Mphasis is repurposed or is excited about the experimentation, co-opting and co-creation. And last but not least, we as leaders within the company shouldn't be afraid to cannibalize our analog business to make progress in digital.
Totally.
Thanks very much for joining us, gentlemen.
Thank you.